morning. I am Sarah Payne Scarborough, Associate VP for External Engagement at Marshall University Research Corporation. And I'm also the Alliance's Operation Council Chair. Welcome to the third day of our annual Small Communities Big Solutions Conference. Wow, what two impressive days on Monday and Tuesday. Hundreds of West Virginians are attending and participating in this annual state update and celebration, and that is truly exciting. The Alliance for the Economic Development of Southern West Virginia and the West Virginia Community Development Hub, along with Coalfield Development, are your hosts. Today, we are focusing on education. We will look at the state's broadband needs, our educational system, and professional development through experts sharing their knowledge on leadership, diversity, and inclusion. I want to thank the presidents, the Operations Council, Stephanie and Brandon, and their organizations for working on this conference. Our planning committee has assembled this amazing program with more than 80 speakers. That's truly remarkable. The committee includes Brittany Bruce with the Alliance, Brandon Dennison with Coalfield Development, Stephanie Tyree with West Virginia Community Development Hub, Marilyn Wren with Coalfield Development, Carol Hyerton with RCBI, Kathy Costco with RCBI, Dr. Michelle Taylor with Bluefield State College, Terry Baker with Osteopathic School Medicine, Kelly Johnson with Marshall University, Susie Mullins with West Virginia Collegiate Recovery Network, Tiffany Ellis Williams with West Virginia State University, Ben Ng with Marshall University, and Tricia Ball with Marshall's Brad D. Smith Business Incubator. Thank you, and thank you to the Operations Council of the Alliance for helping us build this tremendous event. We could not do what we do if it wasn't for our loyal sponsors. United Bank is once again our program sponsor, along with Appalachian Power, ARP, Marshall Health, West Virginia American Water, Marshall University Research Corporation, West Virginia Municipal League, and the West Virginia Executive Magazine. Thank you to all of our sponsors for supporting this endeavor year after year. As many of you know, the Alliance is an education collaborative of 10 colleges and universities in West Virginia. If you look at a map, it's Mason County, Webster County, Pocahontas down. We represent about 30,000 students in our 21 county footprint. Our institutions include Bridge Valley Community and Technical College, West Virginia State University, Marshall University, Concord University, WVU Tech, West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine, Bluefield State College, Southern West Virginia Community and Technical College, New River Community and Technical College, and Mount West Community and Technical College. You will hear from many of these presidents later this morning. Okay, so now, reminder of our conference rules. We have to learn something new, and we have to take something back to our communities. Please check the schedule on wvsolutions.net. This is your online program book. It has our speakers, their bios, photos, attendee information. This is your resource for all week long, so wvsolutions.net. Please remember that we are here to discuss West Virginia and here to celebrate. So please be constructive and stay positive. If you have a question for our higher education presidents panel a little bit later, please put it in the Q&A section and we'll try to get those questions answered. Remember to take a photo and use the hashtag WVSolutions on social media for your chance to win a $25 gift card throughout the conference. We've given away already 4 and we're wanting to give away a lot more money. So let's highlight our state and get people talking about West Virginia. Reminder that each session will be recorded for future reference. For those of you who are wanting continuing education credits for today's session, please remember to put your name and email in the chat. This is how we're taking roll. Don't forget to test your luck every day at 11:15 with Brittany and me on this meeting link. We are giving away $50 gift cards, and we're having a lot of fun while we're doing it too. Now let's get our program officially started this morning. As a proud daughter of Marshall, I have the pleasure of introducing our morning speaker. Dr. Jerry Gilbert is Marshall University's 37th president. In his professional career, he has served in various higher education positions, like professor, graduate program coordinator, associate VP for academic affairs, provost, just to name a few. Dr. Gilbert is truly a visionary and a leader, which if you think about it, it makes sense because his background is in engineering. He leads by example. He leads by building. Every day he builds collaborations, he builds unity here on the campus, and he builds new endeavors. And I'm honored to call him my boss. So welcome, President Gilbert. It's so wonderful to have you this morning.
Thank you, Sarah, and I want to thank Sarah for the excellent job she's done in putting this conference together. And I want to add my welcome to the third day of the Alliance's Small Communities Big Solutions Conference. And I'm pleased to be here with some of my colleagues from the Alliance. As part of my introductory comments, I want to give you a little background on how the Alliance for the Economic Development of Southern West Virginia came about. A little over 3 years ago, I had the idea of a cooperative group in higher education to advance our region and our communities. As my friend, Dr. Mac Patera, former chancellor of the University of Alabama system, often says, in small states, the highest concentration of significant talent is often found in the institutions of higher learning. So it makes perfect sense to get higher education involved in support of economic development. In January of 2018, I asked the presidents of 9 other institutions of higher learnings to join me at the state capitol to announce the formation of the Alliance. The vision of forming this group was to position higher education in the southern part of the state as partners and collaborators. We know that by partnering with industry, small businesses, entrepreneurs, the State Department of Commerce, local economic development entities, the legislature, and the governor's office, that we can make Southern West Virginia a more attractive place for business enterprises. Our institutions offer education of our citizens, training of our workforce, availability of resource, equipment and facilities, R&D capabilities, faculty expertise, and quality of life amenities such as the arts, recreation, and entertainment. We are facilitators and supporters in creating jobs and ensuring a better life for all West Virginians. Collectively, we have come together to leverage our resources in assisting businesses and our communities. An early example of what we have done was to work with the company N3 in Charleston in contacting and connecting our graduates with employment opportunities that they had. They, as we do, wanted to keep people in West Virginia and bring people back to West Virginia. We told them and other companies that higher education stands ready to assist businesses and industry in identifying talent in the Mountain State. The Alliance is currently engaged in conducting our second business survey. We are working with our local chambers of commerce and state and local business leaders to survey business leaders about current topics. We are asking about internship development, the impacts of COVID-19, business sessions planning, and current and future needs of the businesses. We hope to release this survey at the beginning of the legislative session. I'm also proud that the Alliance was successful in securing more than $1.5 million in grant funding to start a statewide collegiate recovery network. We now have in place personnel and resources to address the needs of college students who are dealing with substance use disorder and/or who are in recovery. This is a very important and needed undertaking to support the college students in the opioid crisis. Another success story of the Alliance is the Small Communities Big Solutions Conference. It demonstrates how higher education can bring together leaders and experts to talk about our economy, our education, our communities, and our quality of life in West Virginia. I'm proud that this conference has been able to invite and attract our federal and state officials to the conference so that they can add a very rich dimension to the discussions that are taking place here. On Friday of this week, we are having our first ever statewide student leadership conference, which is being called West Virginia Solution Seekers Student Conference. We want high school and college students to be encouraged and challenged as leaders and see themselves as part of the future of West Virginia. Today is our day to focus on education at the conference. We're going to start off with a panel of distinguished higher education presidents. I will be joined by 6 other presidents of 2-year and 4-year institutions in the Alliance. Our moderator of the panel is the president and CEO of the Huntington Regional Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Bill Bissett. Dr. Bissett not only has a wealth of experience in economic development, but he also has experience in higher education. A number of years ago, he was chief of staff of the former president of Marshall, the late Steve Cobb. Bill is a great choice for a moderator. He is intelligent, he is energetic, he is witty, and sometimes he is even charming. It is my pleasure to turn this over to my friend, Dr. Bill Bissett. Bill?
President Gilbert, thanks for that very accurate introduction. I appreciate it a great deal. You're very, very kind. It's always an honor to moderate this panel. When you're interested in post-secondary education, I think the key to this panel is for me to talk as little as possible and let the presidents communicate with the audience at home and at their office, because we really have to have all these folks in one room is uncommon, I think, for us to be a fly on the wall and hear from them directly. So I'm going to be brief in my initial comments, but I do want to thank everyone for being involved. Again, President Gilbert, thank you. And I'd also be remiss not to thank Sarah and Brittany for setting up a lot of this conference, because I've received so many positive comments even before today's event. People in Charleston and other areas contacted me saying, wow, what a great thing. So thank you for your collaboration. Thank you for your participation. Our panelists today will be Dr. Pamela Alderman, President, Southern West Virginia Community and Technical College; Dr. Kendra Boggess, President, Concord University; Dr. Bonny Copenhaver, President, New River Community and Technical College; Dr. Jerry Gilbert, of course, President, Marshall University; Dr. Carolyn Long, President of the West Virginia University of Institute of Technology; and Dr. James W. Nemitz, President, West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine; and Dr. Nicole Pride, who we're so happy has joined us, for the President of West Virginia State University. But I'll begin with our 2 new presidents, if I could, and that's President Alderman, President Pride. You've just joined as a president, and if I've looked at your bios correctly, this is your first presidency. How are you faring? It's a big job. It's a challenging job. You've picked, let's say, an exciting time to be a president, obviously. We wish you great success, but one, how's it going, and how are you adjusting to this important role?
This is Pam, Alderman. I am adjusting. It is an interesting time to on a presidency, enter as a president in the midst of COVID. When I first arrived, I was one of not speaking everything. But then my ratio is I was here for 28 years previous in various administrative capacities and as a faculty member. So I did have that advantage coming back to Southern as the president. And we've just been working with challenges and going with the flow and trying to make sure the needs of our students and our faculty and staff are met.
President Pride, we can't hear you, man. President Pride, I'm afraid we can't hear you, ma'am. We'll hang tight. I really want to hear from President Pride. I want to give her a minute here and see if we can get the audio working. We may have to move on. Oh, there, I got you. There you go. Yes, yes, please, President Pride. I was going to say, if you ever want to run for office, you have the perfect name for it. You know, Pride is forward, pride in our community. So just a thought, if you get tired of being a president, we can always run you for something in West Virginia.
Thank you. Good morning. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I'm really pleased to be here. And so similar to my other colleagues, we're adjusting here as best as we can, and looking at the importance of the safety of our students and faculty and staff, and looking at the operations of the university, all the things that you do in a 90-day window of assessing the institution, the organization. And so I'm glad to be here. I joined from North Carolina A&T State University, which is a doctoral research intensive land grant institution and the largest HBCU in the nation. So I've been there at a decade, and in several leadership capacities. And so a lot of this looks very familiar.
Well, thanks very much, and welcome to both of you. I really want to go to economic development next, if we could, because that's obviously, I think, the thrust of this. We could literally spend 4 days on COVID effortlessly, I think, if we wanted to. But if you could talk about that connection between your institution, I'd like to open it up to all the panelists, and the private sector, because to be honest with you, as somebody who's worked in higher ed and run a chamber of commerce, we often speak a very different language. And I think the real key is translation. How can we understand each other better? And there's a lot of disconnects, and we have both Mount West and Marshall in our chamber membership, and overcoming those hurdles is what we try to work upon. How have you succeeded in that? Because I think it doesn't just go from large companies, it's all companies as we affect the economy in post-secondary education. And I'll just throw it open to anyone at that point if I could.
Well, this is Carolyn from WVU Tech, and I will tell you, I think one of the best things that we have done is not only to work with the chamber and with our businesses in Beckley, but to also look at our curriculum and make sure that our curriculum is aligned with the things that are needed now. Sometimes we're a little behind and the curriculum stays behind and the businesses move forward. So I think we've worked very closely with our new construction management project, which we were told we need construction management in the state, and looking at programs like that, our adventure recreation, looking at programs that work with the area in which we are, but also other programs that make sure that our students are ready and we have the workforce that's needed not only in the state, but in the country.
I'll say at Marshall, we have a center, RCBI, which is a industrial outreach advanced manufacturing center. And we've been working with companies throughout West Virginia, helping them with prototypes, training, all sorts of things related to increased efficiencies in their business. We recently opened a business incubator in town. We also have programs, as Carolyn was saying about her institutions, that are geared towards working with opportunities in our economy. RCBI recently got a grant from EDA to be RCBI Aero to look at expanding the aerospace industry in our region. And we partnered with Mount West Community and Technical College, and we are offering next fall the first joint degree program between a 2-year and a 4-year. It will be an associate's degree offered by both Marshall and Mount West for people to work on aircraft. It's an A&P program, and the diplomas will have both Marshall's name on them and Mount West Technical and Community College. So we are very proud of that collaboration. We think that institutions of higher learning need to work with both industries and with each other to create opportunities and advance West Virginia.
I'll jump in there too. This is Bonny at New River. Very similar to what President Gilbert was talking about. New River also has the opportunity, I think, to participate in the aviation sector. New River's footprint covers 2 regional airports. We have the one here that's in Raleigh County, and then there's one that's in Greenbrier County. And working with President Long and her institution, being able to be sort of on the ground floor of bringing businesses into this area in aviation will give New River also the opportunity to look at an A&P program and then be able to articulate that potentially into an aviation management program that is at WVU Tech. I think another piece for New River and connecting this to the chamber, when I first got here, the chamber, especially in Raleigh County and Beckley, was very concerned about the nursing shortage. New River does have an LPN program, a licensed practical nurse program, but hopefully if everything lines up correctly and the Board of Nursing approves us for one final visit in December, starting in January, New River will be able to do an LPN to RN bridge program. This will start at our Greenbrier Valley campus. And then eventually and hopefully we'll be able then to articulate that RN into our 4-year partners that already have a BSN degree, so that we will have that nice strong pipeline that runs from an LPN all the way through, and then connecting back to our high schools on the other end, bring those students in who were in certified nursing programs or even a high school LPN program, so that we'll be able to see this large pipeline feeding into the nursing industry that's in this area.
Dr. Nemitz? Can't hear you, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Yeah, so continuing, Jim Nemitz, WVSOM, and so continuing with the healthcare pipeline, you know, that's what WVSOM is doing as well, is growing, you know, competent, quality, compassionate physicians to serve the state of West Virginia. And so, you know, some of our efforts are our partnerships, especially with, you know, Marshall and Mountain Health Mountain Health System, as well as CAMC in Charleston, and developing those relationships. Because, for example, in Charleston with CAMC, we expanded the number of students we're sending there for clinical training. The reason why we did that was because we know that you know, our students do well at CAMC. They you know, you know, they're well received there. And the thing is a lot of times they will end up doing their residencies there and then eventually staying in the state. We hope to, you know, we certainly want to work with all of our partners, and same thing goes true for Mountain Health Network, you know, in Huntington, you know, and working there, and again, our students rotating in that area in the 3rd and 4th year, and then going on to residencies in Huntington, and then stay to serve. And so along those lines, we also work with institutions across the state, and most recently with West Virginia Wesleyan, where we have a program now where we identify high caliber high school students who then have the metrics that we believe will make them successful in med school, and having criteria in place and doing an interview with them, but basically getting provisionally accepted into medical school while they're beginning their college career, we think is a real advantage to those students, and again will result in retaining people to serve as physicians. And you know, the thing about physicians is they are the leaders of the healthcare teams, and as more and more physicians age and retire, there's a huge need to, and there's a huge concern about replacing those physicians with new quality physicians.
President Boggess, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, we were working closely with our local chambers on mentorship programs. I think it's really important that our students get a taste of what's out there. Many students in Southern West Virginia have not been particularly, I guess, involved with any business community. I've been told since I've been here, which is a very long time, that there are students in the southern coalfield areas that the only professionals they've seen really are doctors or a lawyer or a judge. And we need to stretch that. And so working with our chambers, I think it really does help us to involve our students in a broader perspective of what might be. They come to a four-year school, and many of them, they think they want a college degree. They don't really know what that means, so they don't know the opportunity behind it. And I will say that we've worked very, very hard during this COVID time to reach out more to local businesses. So we were able to work with a local business here in Princeton, Custom Manufacturing Services, and they came over and literally switched what they normally did, which was serving the coal industry. And they designed plexiglass shields and all kinds of things for us to be safer. And that's been a really good partnership. So I think there are a lot of opportunities. I also think in my area, I'm from a city, I'm from Florida, I'm from a city, and I like city life. But I actually have come to love where I live because I can go out and in 10 minutes, I can be in a tourist mecca that people don't know about. I mean, I can hike, and I think we need to really work hard to build the connections between colleges and universities and the tourism industry, and just sell the state of West Virginia, because we live in one of the most beautiful places on earth. It's just a great place to be. And I think our students recognize that, and they want to work here. They want to live here. They want to be near their families. And I think we're in a great position to help them do that.
It's funny you say that, President Boggess. That's exactly what I tell potential employers when they contact our office, that everything in my life is 8 minutes from me. My children's school, my alma mater, my hospital, my office, and time is the commodity we can never get back. So I think you're right on target with that. We, as natives, we often overlook that. We think everywhere is convenient as here, and it's not. So it's a real blessing. I'm right on target with you there. Let me change, rather than go back to COVID, let me ask about this. We all know the degree attainment, not only in Appalachia, but in West Virginia, is nowhere near where we want it to be. And everyone on this panel is charged with bettering that horrible statistic that we've been saddled with since the 1970s, I'm told. As people who not only recruit students, but retain students, how do we increase the emphasis on completing, walking across that stage? That's the thing that I think we all are challenged with. Obviously, that's a metric that your success is gauged by. But I think, how do we get out to the public the importance of that? And I think it goes somewhat with President Boggess was talking about, how do we get to that final part, what that opportunity creates? But at the same time, how do we change the perception of, one, it's a huge investment, two, it's a lot of your time, come back home and don't move away, all the things we hear in West Virginia. But that's where you guys are mostly recruiting from. So I guess my point is, how do we use you to fix West Virginia and that attainment rate, which is also something that potential employers bring up to me a lot when I talk to them. Go ahead, President Copenhaver.
Yeah, I'll sort of take that on. I think, one thing that we do have to do is demystify higher education. This is a culture, Appalachian culture is my home culture, and we have a great hesitancy for education of any type, higher ed or otherwise, because that brings change, it brings suspicion. And as we begin to demystify it and be able to talk about it in plain, ordinary language, higher ed has a sort of a cult of its own when it comes to language. And I have railed against that cult. One of the things that we're doing at New River, we are learning to love the students that we have, not the ones we wish we had, because we can sit around all day and worry that they're not prepared to come to me as a college ready student. Well, I can't fix why they're not prepared. I can work with others on it, but at the end of the day, I have to accept my students as they come, and that is warts and all, if you will, and to be able to work with that. And we're also working on becoming an institution that is ready for students. I have to be ready to take them. And not think about it as I'm going to make them fit into a model that I have. I'm not going to force them to come to class Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays at 10 a.m. because that's convenient for the institution. If they need to come to class at 10 p.m. in the evening because that's convenient for them, then it's incumbent upon my institution to be able to do that and to provide that. And so it all is, I think, sometimes in how we talk about it, especially to break through those barriers, to begin to break it down so those conversations are heard.
I remember a young student at Marshall asking me what a bursar was. And you're right on target. I always, I
hate that term. I cannot, because who in the world uses that in everyday language? I mean, and I'm insulted bursars, but I don't mean to do that, but yeah,
it's like we're suddenly in the Colonial Navy or something like that. President Gilbert, let me go to President Boggess, and I'll go to you, sir, if that's okay. President Boggess?
Yes, well, I think one of the things we need to talk about as a higher ed group is affordability. I was listening to a national broadcast this morning, and it was, that universities must bring their prices down, that we charge $70,000 a year. Are you kidding me? That our faculty make $250,000 a year. That's insane. Our average faculty member, and we don't have a med school, so it's like $50,000, $60,000 a year. These people are dedicated, and they love our students, and they care that they learn. And if they don't, they go somewhere else. So, I think that we need to sell the value that's here already. We are affordable. We do everything we can possibly do to reduce the cost of attending school. All of us probably have food pantries. There's food insecurity. We have students who literally drop out of school because their car breaks down and they don't have $300. We need to find ways to partner with our local communities to help those kids, because and adults. Many of them are adults who, they hit a rough patch and they give up, and they don't believe they're worth it, and they are worth it. And we've got, to me, that's one of the biggest challenges. We've got to find a way to make people understand, and people in this area understand, this is not an unattainable goal. And higher ed will change your life. It will change your family's life. It will change the life of your entire family tree forever once you do this. So, I think that's one thing that we need to do a better job of selling the idea of affordability here in West Virginia. We have very affordable educational costs.
Very well said. President Gilbert?
I think there are a couple of things that we can do and need to continue doing. One thing we've talked about already, I think we've got to have partnerships with industry so that when our students come to the university or the college, that they have opportunity to be in a co-op program or internship and get on-the-job training so that they can see the connection of their education to a potential career. Also, I will say that COVID-19 taught us something, and I think it's taught people all over the country this, and that is standardized test scores are not anything special or magic, and many times they are a barrier to entry to students. We have been having discussions recently about, well, I hesitate to say it, but I'll say systemic racism as it relates to medical school, and the fact that the MCAT is a huge barrier to people of color getting into medical school. And we've started looking at ways at Marshall that we're still going to require a score, but we're not going to have a minimum MCAT score to get into med school. And we think that we will increase the number of applicants of people of color. We've also put in place a program where undergraduate students who are minorities or people of color can get preparation for the MCAT and other graduate test scores that they have to get into programs. We are, this year, HEPC has said we are going to relax our entrance requirements. I think that should be a permanent thing. I think that in many cases, as I said earlier, these test scores are barriers to students who may have been in an education system or have suffered from historical inability to have access to higher education, and their test scores are low. Many of these test scores are not intelligence tests, they are achievement tests. And if you're in a poor school system, like many of them in West Virginia, you're not going to score as high as you would if you were in Boston in some tidy high school. So we need to give access to our students and make sure that they are successful when they get here. I agree that once our students are here, my goal is that every student that walks in the door to Marshall has everything possible to succeed. And if they need something, we need to provide it. And we need to put resources into supporting every student that walks in the door so that if they don't succeed, it's not because we didn't try to make them successful.
President Long.
Yes, sir. I think all the comments have been very, very thoughtful and certainly right on track. But coming from public ed, I will tell you that I think one of the concerns I have is that we need to make parents understand more about how important education is. And it has been a culture in West Virginia, I think, be it said or be it not said, that people are a little afraid to educate their children because in most cases that means they leave. And so we have to change that mindset of them leaving, that the education will provide them a way to stay in West Virginia and live a better life. And I think parents, if we can get parents to believe that and to work with us with that, then we can get more of these students that otherwise many of them won't even consider going to college because of that fear of being left behind, their children leaving them behind and not being with them. And that's a wonderful thing in West Virginia. It's a way of life for us, but we have to find a way to make those parents feel comfortable that this education is important.
President Long, one of the things I often talk about, and I've talked to parents who would rather their children not go to post-secondary education because they're afraid they'll move away. But I always mention that magnetic pull of Appalachia that will bring you back eventually. We all, I mean, and a lot of people on the panel here, we all come back. And that's not much consolation, but there's something there, I think. President Alderman, you wanted to say something?
Thank you. We had some very thoughtful discussion, and I agree with everyone. I especially agree with Dr. Gilbert with the barriers that we have placed before our students with the testing scores and those types of things. When I first entered higher education in 1987, many of our students had to take 2, 3, 4 years of, or 4 courses in developmental education before they could get to the first college level English or math course. So we have changed that in the community colleges with a curricular model that is working extremely well. But the other pieces I believe we need to look at is working with our high school partners, our county boards of education, getting to these students early on. And as President Long said, working with the parents as they are in school. You know, we're transitioning in Southern West Virginia from a 100-year economy. Our coal industry was booming for many, many years. And now for over the last 7, 8 years, we have transitioned and we're trying to re-envision and to revive Southern West Virginia. And what we need to do is make sure that when we get the students into the community college, we're able to align a pathway where they can complete in the time allotted within 4 to 5 semesters, at the most 5 semesters. And then we have to work with our college university colleagues at the 4-year institutions, making sure we have a pathway that students can transition and they can transfer seamlessly to our 4-year colleges and universities. And many of those times, hopefully we can do that not only with the students going on campus, but also looking at programs that are distance learning remote, because still in West Virginia, many of our folks are still place bound. Very difficult for them to move, even after attaining an associate degree, to move to a campus to complete their 4-year degree.
Thank you very much. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, but kind of stay on the same path, and it goes to recruitment. I'd like to throw to President Pride if I could. I recently was on an aircraft before COVID with a young man, person of color, who had long dreads and had his IT degree from NCAT. And he and his wife were both very proud graduates. We're going to clearly take over the world very shortly. Just a great story. How do we get those folks here? Not just for HBUCs, but for all of us, to increase our diversity. I mean, that's a pretty big question to hit you with, but as Appalachians, a lot of us want to embrace diversity and inclusion, but are so challenged to do so, but we want to. How do you see us in your limited window here? You've been here. Yeah, can you fix all that for us if you would? That'd be good. Thank you.
That's a really good question and a thoughtful one. Thank you for it. I think to increase diversity, we really have to think about what does it mean, and we're having that conversation here. We're historically Black college, and many of the students who we've spoken to here of color say that when they come to us, that they really want to have an HBCU experience. So they want campuses to give them experiences that make them feel welcomed. And what does that mean? So it means that the activities and programs that we host on our college campuses should look and feel inclusive, that there is open dialogue that exists about different cultures, about race, about equity. And so when we look at and think about, how do we attract the students here? First, it's, typically it's what we're marketing. What are we selling? What's the brand, the value proposition? Telling students, what will they experience when they come on our campuses and what's around them? We know that first students pick a university first because you have my major. Number one in the data says students say, okay, you have my major. From there, they're also looking at where we're located. Is it cold? Is it warm? Is it Midwest? Is it South? What kind of programs do we have? Do we have good sports? Many students look at, the data says they look at athletics, but then they want programming. Do we have fraternities and sororities? What kind of programming do we have? And then is there someone there that's going to look like me? And if it is, can I see myself on that campus? And what kind of activities do we have that embrace my diversity that I'm bringing to the campus? What's that experience like? And so if for instance, for us, if our band, if we want to increase engagement in athletics, if our band is only playing certain types of music, our students feel excluded. If they are doing things and chanting that is a part of African-American culture, or if you're looking at Latina culture, is it that somebody says, well, they're too loud, and so we have to think about, in my mind, to be intentional about it, is first starting with diversity, equity, and inclusion focused programming conversations among our faculty and staff, and having the understanding of what that looks like, so that when you have students of color in your classroom, that you don't have faculty making comments about a student of color, about understanding the culture that our students bring, so that we can increase. And I always tell people diversity isn't just about race. Diversity is diversity of thought, it's diversity, it's so many different things that are important. So I think that having the conversation, having intentional training around diversity, equity, and inclusion, so that we're clear on what all of that means, and then ensuring that we have the support services and programming around to ensure that students from diverse backgrounds feel welcome.
Let me go to President Long next, and I'll go to President Gilbert and President Nemitz. Go ahead, President Long.
Well, I didn't have my hand up, but I'm more than happy to respond.
I thought you did. Sorry about that.
It may not have gone down, I'm not sure. But certainly we're doing the same thing of having those discussions on campus. And it's vitally important to all of us as we move forward to make sure that we are making everyone feel comfortable on our campuses.
Awesome. My apologies, President Gilbert.
You know, I think we have to be intentional and deliberate. I have had a lot of discussions over the past 6 months with people on my campus. And as a white male, I've got a lot of blind spots, you know, that I don't even understand or realize. And I've got to be aware that I can't see everything from my perspective that other people that aren't white see. And I've got to ask those questions. I've got to have those discussions. I've got to encourage people to explore things beyond their own culture and their own background so that they can understand other people. We've got to make them feel welcome. We've got to listen to them intensely, not superficially. And as Dr. Pride said, we've got to put things on our campus so that when they walk on our campus, they don't feel like they are strangers or that they are invisible. I've heard it from Black students at my former institution where we had 20% African Americans. They said, we are invisible. And I thought, how could you be invisible? You're 1 out of 5 students. It's because they didn't have programming, they didn't have imaging, they didn't have activities that were focused on them. They were all focused on the majority. So we have to realize that even though we're not making overt statements, that we are all the time sending messages in what we represent our institution as. So if we've got to represent our institution as an inclusive institution, because if you just let it stand as it is, it will not be welcoming. It will be welcoming only to those in the majority. So we have to be deliberate and we have to think about everything we do.
Well said. Well said. President Nemitz?
Sure, I would add that certainly I agree with President Gilbert and the other presidents, and I especially Dr. Gilbert's comments really resonate with me as an older white male. But a couple of things that I would like to share that have helped WVSOM to increase its diversity amongst students was recruiting nationally. When the school many years ago, we limited our recruitment to the state of West Virginia and then southern states. And over time, especially as we increased our class size, we needed to recruit nationally. And as a result, it really improved our diversity profile by doing that. And then, you know, basically going into traditional colleges and universities that you know, had people of color that we could then, you know, large groups that we could then tell our story and be able to attract them. You're absolutely right. You have to have the right environment on campus, and that can be a challenge in a small town that is predominantly white. But we work with our students. You know, I think the key thing is working with your students and getting their input as to what can help. And so establishing national organizations on our campus and having an identity and then you know, recognizing that diversity is more than just race and ethnicity, that you know, we focused a lot on the LGBTQ population as well. And then, you know, introducing, and especially important for medical students to introduce to them, and by using standardized patients, interactions with diverse populations is a very effective tool. Thank you.
Well said. I want to throw it out to any other panelists if they want to comment on this topic, but I always quote our Speaker of the House of West Virginia, Roger Hanshaw, who said, it's not that West Virginia has a bad reputation nationally, we have no reputation in a lot of cases. And the one great thing about, I think, bringing people from other states or even other countries to West Virginia is they go back home with this understanding of what a great place this is. So it, to use a term used earlier, demystifies, I think, you know, what's great about this place. Does anyone else want to comment before we move on? Okay, all right, thank you. Well, we have a legislative session coming up, and it's going to happen, I'm afraid, no matter what. So we best get ready for it. Do you see anything on the horizon as far as higher ed? I mean, I think we're all hearing about budget issues specifically, but is there anything you'd like to see that you'd want to say publicly as far as what the legislature do could help in your mission? And obviously funding is everything, I get that. But, you know, I think as we deal with COVID, as we try to respond, as we have all these challenges, is there any messages for this legislature, what they could do to help? Yeah, I would suggest that, you know, staying away from social issues, staying away from things like campus carry would be very smart. But specifically, I always try, you know, and again, I'll quote Speaker Hanshaw, you know, give me a bill I can run that will help you. Don't give me an idea, give me something in writing that he can put on the floor and go with. Any ideas or anyone want to jump out on that question? President Long? I saw your hand. You're muted, ma'am.
I'm sorry. I think over and over again, all the presidents, all of us have discussed the mental health aspect of what this pandemic has done. So I think through HEPC also, I think they're going to work, and everybody's going to look and say, we all need more money. Everybody needs to pay for all the things we've had to pay for. But really and truly, the health and well-being of our students needs to come first, and of our faculty and staff in many ways. And so I think that looking at some kind of funding to help us with the mental health aspect of what this COVID has done would be monumentally important to all of us.
It's very well said, and I'd almost like to see that be a larger population for everyone. It seems like we're all stressed out all the time now, without a doubt. President Copenhaver? You cannot unmute, ma'am. I'm sorry.
You'd think we'd learn how to do that by now.
It's okay.
I think I would just stress the support and continuing support of funding things like West Virginia Invests and the Promise Scholarship. Even if we weren't under a pandemic situation, I still think the undergirding by the legislature of direct financial aid to our students is so important. That ability of a student to come, you know, to be, we've demystified it for them. We've gotten them in with the program that they wanted. We've reached their parents. We've done all of those things. But at the end of the day, you can't pay the bill. You can't pay the bill. And I think looking at those scholarships and any future scholarships that they might want to fund on our behalf or behalf of our students, that they make them as barrier-free as possible. That sometimes we set up all of these barriers to weed out the people that we don't want to come to college or we don't think are worthy of a scholarship. And I would suggest if you want to come, then you need to qualify for a scholarship. You should qualify for a state scholarship. And because that is an investment in the state, in the student, you know, in everything. But that ability to have either West Virginia Invest and the Promise is just critical for us.
Understood. Thank you, Dr. Nemitz.
Yeah, actually related to that, that's an excellent suggestion. Last year, I think it was last year, Delegate Ellington had a bill passed that enables the 3 medical schools in the state to offer to out-of-state students in-state tuition rates with you know, the caveat that they serve the state for several years after their residency. You know, I think we need to do more programs like that to attract people to our state and continue to build up our state.
That sounds excellent, and it fills that need that we have that you mentioned earlier. President Gilbert?
I've several times suggested and actually got a bill that was introduced last year of partnering with businesses so that businesses could sponsor a scholarship for a student that would be a partial ride or a full ride scholarship and then get a tax credit. So a business could get tax credits for helping students go to college, and perhaps even tying that to an internship or a co-op opportunity to take a little bit of the burden off the state and actually let private businesses, because many of the businesses would be willing to do that if they felt like they had some tax advantage associated with sponsoring students to go to college, because we know that financial access is a barrier to many students, not just in West Virginia, but all over the country. We are not an expensive state. However, our per capita income is not that high in West Virginia. So it is expensive to our students. It may not be expensive to someone in Texas or New York, but it's expensive for students in West Virginia.
Would any other panelists like to comment on that topic before we move on? Okay, I'm going to switch gears on you aggressively again, if I could, and go to the concept of entrepreneurship. It's obviously one of the themes of this conference, but I also kind of put it in the same bag as critical thinking. Like that day I started thinking critically, I remember October 13th, you know, to teach someone to be an entrepreneur, I think is terrifying to those outside that culture. And whether you have, you know, whether you're an HVAC, whether you're a medical doctor, anywhere I think on the, you know, academic spectrum, you need to know how to run a business. You need to know how to, you know, monetize what you've learned. And how do we do that effectively? I mean, I love the idea of, you know, mentorship with a guy like Dr. Ben Ang that they have at Marshall, who, you know, who has the energy and enthusiasm and I think leads by example. But how do we change that culture that I need to fill out an application and go get a job somewhere, as opposed to creating my livelihood, which even as a 55-year-old terrifies me on some level, but that's really what we need in West Virginia. Go ahead. Let's see, President Boggess, please.
I think that we have a lot of examples right now in West Virginia. We live near Princeton, and Princeton has really turned around its downtown. It's one or two young people down there who are so excited, and they've got people to buy in. And so getting our students into Princeton, which is not too hard, we've got them working with those people. And I know a couple of our alums have started little businesses there. We also take part in the West Virginia Business Plan Competition. We've got excited faculty members here on campus that do this. I'll say I'm a daughter of an entrepreneur. I was the wife of an entrepreneur, and it terrifies me too. You know, I know what you need to know. I know how difficult it is. And I think they need to learn those kinds. They need to be a little bit afraid, but they also need to have the encouragement to step out, especially when you're young. You can afford it. You don't have a lot to lose. You have everything to gain. And if we can excite them about being their own bosses, being able to set their own rules. And a lot of young people today want that, especially in technology areas. We have a new program here on campus. It's an esports program. It's playing games. But I'm telling you what, those kids are so excited. We're going to start a major in it. It's going to take us a little while to get there, but they are so thrilled with this. And so I think sometimes we have to match what we do with what students want and help them find their way.
Well said. President Pride?
Yeah, the entrepreneurial thinking, what you described in reference, is, in my mind, critically important for students to have that type of thinking infused in all of their classrooms and engagement as we, they experience the teaching and learning and go through those experiences on campus. We're actually in early discussions now and put a proposal together with a donor who we're talking about creating a Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation on our campus so that we can really build the ecosystem here that supports faculty and students on our campus in the creation of new businesses or improvement of existing businesses through mentoring opportunities, experiential learning, and support for innovative startups and providing programs and resources to support that. And so it's important that as we develop that it's connected to partnerships in the community so that we get where students understand, how you begin a business, get mentors throughout the community. So there's this integration of learning, the experiential learning that actually takes place not only here on our campus, but in the community. So it's an important thing to us, and we're really in the throes of and deep discussions on creating that center for our campus so we can impact our community.
It's great. Good luck with it.
Thank you.
President Copenhaver.
I'm probably going to take a little different approach to this, but when I think about being able to do or support entrepreneurship, sort of go back to, well, what kind of trait would I need to see in a student? And one of the things that I would stress is that we teach how to be flexible. We are living in a society right now that some would argue is probably extraordinarily rigid, but entrepreneurs require flexibility. And one of the great things about COVID, if you can use great in COVID in the same sentence, is that we have had to learn how to be flexible as an institution, and as people who work in an institution and probably even in your own family. That the ability not to be incapacitated by learning how to go with the flow, by starting down a process that you thought was going to work, but you realize it's not, and you have to change. That flexibility that's coming out of COVID, I think, does feed into this, and so that you have a more receptive vessel when you start then talking about creating your own business. I agree. I certainly wouldn't want to do that. I have no idea how to do that. I would be extraordinarily freaked out. But I am all about being flexible and that change that comes with that. So it is, before you even get to some of the other great ideas, you have to have that student be open to that. And as we're flexible now, our teachers, they have to model that flexibility. They may have started the semester in one methodology teaching, in person, and they had to switch and be offline at the drop of a hat. And our students are watching us. They're learning from how we handle this COVID or any other issue that comes along in the classroom, how we problem solve and how flexible we can be in that problem solving.
Very, very well said. I always think of the confidence that comes after degree completion's got to be in there somewhere too. If I can do this, I could probably start a business. And I think that's a factor too. But President Nemitz, I know you wanted to mention something there. Oh, my apologies, sir. I saw your hand up. I apologize. Go ahead, President Gilbert.
I think one thing that you have to have as an entrepreneur is the ability to take some level of risk. And outside of our business faculty, I would say that faculty, not just in West Virginia, but all over the country, are risk averse. They're very conservative. They don't want things to change. Think of the tenure process. So, my board, for instance, my board of governors, they are not risk averse. They want us to do innovative things and to shake things up. But the faculty, again, outside of the College of Business, that's not in their nature, and it's a difficult conversation to have sometimes. I'm not criticizing my faculty. I'm just saying that's kind of the way it is.
I would comment. I would echo that. That's part of the challenge. Is most people do not want to change, and the real challenge for the presidents is the faculty. And part of that challenge is dealing with our accrediting bodies, because They expect us to have shared governance and you know, it helps sometimes to have a crisis to wake people up. I agree with Dr. Copenhaver. I mean, you know, sometimes we need this to shake us up, and there have been definite opportunities in the COVID environment to actually move things forward. But one of the big challenges we have is working with our faculty and moving forward with them.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on the topic, or can we move on? Let me say everyone's been very civil today and collaborative, but in a way, you're all competitors too. You're competing for public interest, you're competing for donors, you're definitely competing for prospective students. Describe the culture in West Virginia, because I would suggest, while I would like to see more 2+2 agreements, especially between CTCs and 4 years, I think we're getting along better and better. I think the Alliance deserves credit on that. But talk about kind of the culture of higher ed in total from your perspective. Obviously, you are paid to protect your institution and do good work for it. But how are we doing collectively with higher ed in West Virginia, would you suggest? And after that, I'd like to throw to closing comments. I know we're getting tight on time, but any thoughts on that? Like I said, I'd like to see more working between the CTCs and the 4 years, but I know there are challenges to that.
Well, I would just like to comment that, you know, I've been in the system for 30 years, over 30 years. And without a doubt, for the medical school, so I've seen good times and bad times. And without a doubt, we are better, stronger if we work together. And without a doubt, and when we separate and fight amongst ourselves, or and have competition that's not good competition, then that creates problems for the state. And so you know, I encourage collaboration, and you know, I have great collaborators in Dr. Gilbert and you know Dr. Gee. But also with the 4 years in terms of creating pipeline programs. So I you know, it's essential for us. And what COVID has shown, you know, the president's the public presidents of the 4 years of universities and my institution, you know, meet anywhere from 2 to 3 times a week. That really has solidified us, because we share our challenges, our concerns, our successes, and it really has bound us together so that we now see each other not so much as competitors, but as leaders of our institution that are trying to do good for this state. And that needs to be the message. We need to work together, and I think we're doing that. And I think COVID has forced us to do that, and that's a really positive thing.
Great comments. Great comments. President Pride, your hand's up. Did you have something you want to add, ma'am?
Actually, it wasn't supposed to be, but I will now. I can I can respond to the question in a naive way. I'm new, obviously, as we shared, and so I came to the role with the thought of abundance, and so I don't see other institutions as competitors in the sense of that way. You have, I think, as an institution, you have to know, you know, really who your institution is, and who that your competitors can also, if you look at them, you could share ideas, you can get different things and learn from institutions. I wouldn't consider my being a competitor with an R1, for instance, or, you know, we're just not. And so, but there are great things going on at other institutions that you can collaborate on, learn from, and work together. Since I've come in the role, Jerry, Carolyn, other presidents have mirrored that. They've all reached out, offered to help and been supportive. And so you know, being new, I don't see a spirit of competitiveness at all, and nothing but so far collaboration, and that's what I expect and President Geese reached out. I don't see it that way. I think there's great opportunity to collaborate and to work together and to learn from one another.
Well said. President Copenhaver?
Well, having been in some other state systems before getting here, I have to say that this system, both between the other community and technical colleges and then between the four-year schools, is far less competitive than other places where I've been. Where you didn't, you held your cards close to the chest, and you didn't share. And my approach is, very similar to President's Pride. I come in assuming that everybody's going to want to work with me, and that I'm going to, we're going to find this really great relationship, because some of the things that a four-year school does, that's, that we don't have the expertise to do that. I'm going to let them do their part. I'm going to do my part, and we can bring the two together. Now, granted, sometimes, of course, that my naivete can get me into trouble, but that's all right. It's my story, and I stick to it. But I think, especially right now, as resources get scarce, that's when you see, I think, the competitive nature in other institutions come out that I've seen in other states and have been, watching that as whatever that resource or that funding mechanism is shrinks, then everybody becomes very self-absorbed. And, if we think of ourselves as one large unit, a family, however we want to think about it, we are better when we are stronger together than if we are fighting each other. And I, I'm, as the governor says, that one of his very favorite sayings that I love, he says, if a president, or if a frog's not proud of his pond, then he's not a very good frog. And I am very proud of my pond, and I like sharing my pond, that there's plenty of other people that can come into that and make my pond better. And hopefully at the end of the day, help make their pond better.
Well said. Before I get to President Boggess for her response, I'd like to ask a final question, if you can be thinking about it as something you're excited about on the future. Let's let her leave on an optimistic note, something on the horizon that you're looking forward to your institution in the next 1 to 5 years that you see germinating at this point that you can talk about. And we'll probably close it out there if we could. But President Boggess, I want to throw to you for your comment. I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I think that by having one chancellor that covers both of our systems, that's helped enhance some of the ability of all of us to work together. I feel like right now, and I guess I've felt this way for a long time, but I can reach out to other presidents and say, what are you doing? During COVID, we've definitely had to do that because we're creating a new world in higher ed right now. And I think one of our comments last week was, I think all of us, although we didn't go to medical school, we certainly appreciate doctors and the medical profession and understanding all of that a lot better because we've had to work our way through so many changes. So I think there's a spirit of cooperation that's really, really good. I think Bonnie's correct about the scarce resources. It's an issue, and we all love our institutions and we all are responsible for making sure that we serve our areas, and we've all done it for a very long time as institutions. So we want to be able to, we have enthusiasm to be able to continue to do that. And so I would say that I would, agree with many of the comments that were made. In terms of what we're excited about, if you want me to have a couple comments about that, I will. We have a number of new programs that we're going to develop or we're working on. One is in allied health. We have a master's in psychology that's coming online in a year or so, an MBA that we hope to start very quickly. And we also are developing entrepreneurship emphases in the Department of Business, along with our recreation, tourism management. So those are things that, there's a lot of work behind them, and people are working very hard to develop those in a way that is very high quality and serves our students well. So I think there's a lot to be excited about, including a vaccine.
Thank you also for participating. Who'd like to go next on final comments? President Alderman, can I throw it to you?
Sorry, I'm technologically challenged at times. I apologize. Although I've been here only 6 months, we have a lot of new programs that we are looking at. We're looking to review our portfolio of courses and programs, making sure that we're offering what the industry wants us to offer or what we need to be offering for the transferability of our students. What I'm looking forward to the most is the revitalization of Southern. For many years, past several years, we have been an entity unto ourselves. And as you know, community colleges, community is in our name for a purpose. And I am excited about working with each of the communities and our six county service district, trying to build relationships and partnerships and working with each person, not only at the county level, but also within the county as well, from the political leaders down to those in the public schools and the community at large. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I think we have a good momentum that has started over the last few months since I have come to Southern. We saw an uptick in our enrollment by about 5%. We've not had an uptick like that in more than 10 years. So we want to see that continue.
Awesome. Well, very best wishes. It's great to see you and wish you the best. President Long.
Thank you.
Well, I'm probably the oldest person around the table, if we want to call it around the table. And I always see the glass half full. And I think this has been a terrible thing that's happened to our country, to our state, but we have such opportunities now to move forward, to find a more positive way to do things. And I think with a couple of the things that we're going to do at Tech, going to do in cooperation with our community college, with Bonny, but also with the main campus in Morgantown. We are very excited that some of our engineers will be very much in the loop for the new Hyperloop that the state of West Virginia has gotten. And of course, our adventure recreation is going to be very much a part of the new work remote, the new great contribution that Brad Smith, a Marshall alum, has given WVU and the state of West Virginia for us to bring more people here and to hook into all of this wonderful tourism, as I believe that Kendra was talking about. So I think there's just wonderful things on the horizon. And I look forward to working with everyone around the table and watching our wonderful state move forward because of higher ed.
Appreciate your comments a great deal. President Copenhaver.
When a year ago this past January, New River gave me a 1-year celebration. I did not do an inauguration, but I did a 1-year celebration. And one of the things that I shared in my opening remarks was that not long after I got my husband and I moved to West Virginia, somebody said to me, "Why would you want to go to that school? That school has problems." And my first thought was, what a terribly rude question. But my answer to that question was, I see a wonderful institution with lots of great possibilities. And I shared that story and that narrative, and over and over again, I see a wonderful institution with lots of great possibilities. And that is my sort of hope and vision for the intervening future. Very much like Southern, I think New River has been very internally focused for a long, long time. And it is starting to sort of make that shift again, to come out of its shell and to be a part and to be engaged. As I was listening to on Monday, there was a session about rural revitalization. And Lori Vincent, said the worst thing you can say is we're the best kept secret. And that you never want to say that. And I thought, oh my goodness, that absolutely sort of encapsulates kind of where New River has been and breaking free from that secret. And as we work with the branding and our new programs, the nursing program, the aviation program that I've mentioned, to be confident and to be strong as an organization and as an institution, that we deserve our place in the community, and that we have a lot to offer that community. And I see a lot of hope. I see a lot of hope for the students that come to New River, and for those that work there, that, you know, the future will be bright. And it is bright. We're having bright moments right now, even in the darkest of these times. There are really great things happening in each and every one of my classrooms. And that's to be celebrated and not to be hidden under a bushel somewhere. So thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with everybody today. And thanks to all my colleagues. I always enjoy listening, and I learn from you all.
That's excellent. President Nemitz?
Sure. I echo Dr. Copenhaver's remarks in terms of this has been a great forum. It's great to see everybody and interact. And it's been a great conference. Dr. Gilbert, I can't thank you enough for putting the alliance together. It really was a brilliant move and needed. What I would say is WVSOM is also excited. What's so unusual about my institution is that we have one program. And so like Dr. Gilbert, I have a pretty aggressive board, and they want to see us that, you know, we have all our eggs in one basket. So we are looking at new programs ourselves, and we're excited about that. Haven't made that decision as to what, but it'll be health related. And the other thing I would say is, you know, and I talked about this some yesterday, is we're really excited about our Klingman Center in downtown Lewisburg and the programs we're running out of that. We're a leader in the state for community engagement, trying to help West Virginians improve their health, as well as dealing with COVID and opioid problems. And we hope that the programs that we create and are creating in our area will then spread around the state and around the country, because there's a lot of work to be done with communities, and we're excited about that and making a difference.
Thank you. Thank you. President Pride, can I throw to you?
Absolutely. So I'm really excited about the future. We're going to go into a strategic planning effort so that we can set the roadmap for the future of our institution. You're going to see a new commitment to our land grant mission that's so critically important around that focus on STEM education, STEM related programming, not at the expense, obviously, of the arts and other programming that's important, in degree programs that are going to meet the needs of our state and our region and the nation. We know there are a number of STEM jobs that have gone unfilled, millions of them across the country. And so there's a significant opportunity out there, and an importance and a need for us to commit to the extension efforts, research, and really focusing on what we are and who we are as a land grant university. So we're obviously talking about the importance of focusing on new degree programs, similar to the nursing program we just launched this fall, and what those strategic partnerships look like. So we have a lot to be happy and thoughtful, optimistic about the future. And so I'm looking forward to the work ahead for us.
Excellent. We wish you great success. I hope you know.
And thank you for having me today.
Of course. Thanks so much for letting me moderate the group. I'll throw to President Gilbert for final comments, but thanks so much. I hope you'll have me back next year, and I hope to God we're all in the same room for once. So we'll see what happens. But again, wish you all have super critical jobs, and anything, I know that on behalf of the private sector and the business community, anything we can do to help you, we will. President Gilbert, the floor is yours.
I'd like to reiterate what I've said earlier, and that is I'm looking forward to working with my partners. Many of them are on this panel today, but also with Mount West Community and Technical College, our new A&P program next fall. We're excited about that. We also have a new flight school that's going to be in Charleston at Yeager Airport. Other programs, we're seeing tremendous growth in our cybersecurity. We've got a contract with Homeland Security looking at the dark web, and also we're starting a specialty agriculture program at Marshall next fall, which will be urban agriculture, sort of the farm to table small scale. So lots of physician's assistant programs starting in January. Lots of exciting things, as many of my colleagues have mentioned. I think collaboration, cooperation will benefit us all in the future. So thank everyone for being on the panel, and I value everyone's friendship and comradeship as we have developed it through the Alliance. So thank you all.
Well, thank you so much to all the presidents. This is truly a highlight of the conference. We've been doing this panel every year for 3 years now, and just a wealth of information, great dialogue, and we always learn something new. And I want to give a big shout out to Dr. Bill Bissett for being the moderator today. He does an excellent job because of his background and expertise, both in business and industry, but also higher ed. So thank you, Bill, very much. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next year, and hopefully we will be in person. And it really is very inspirational that when we talk about higher ed and when we talk about what we're seeing and how we're growing as a state, it's just, we have a lot of great things going on in West Virginia, and we just have to tell our story. And this conference is a really big, important part of telling our story. So we will now shift gears, and I'm very excited to ask Mara Boggess to introduce our next speaker. Mara Boggess is the state director for U.S. Senator Joe Manchin, and she is a combat veteran. She is inspiration and a role model for young women all across the Mountain State. And she happens to be a great friend of mine, and she was my former boss. So with all of that, I've learned so much from Mara, and our friendship continues even still to this day. And welcome, Mara. Thank you so much for getting us started with the next speaker.
Well, good morning, and thank you to my very dear friend and everyone's friend, Sarah Payne, and Dr. Gilbert in the Alliance, the West Virginia Community Development Hub, and Coalfield Development for hosting this wonderful conference. It's quite an honor to follow such an esteemed panel of college presidents and Bill Bissett, who are working so hard to educate our next generation of leaders. It's even more of an honor to introduce our next speaker, who is also one of our newest West Virginians. Chris Fussell and his wife, Holly, along with their 2 wonderful children, have been coming to West Virginia for years. They loved it so much that they moved from DC to Fayetteville earlier this year. They bought a home, put their kids in school, and are quickly becoming leaders in the state. They have great ideas, lots of energy, and many contacts in industries that can bring good jobs here to us. Although he's humble in nature and wouldn't want me to do this, I'd like to tell you a little more about Chris. He's originally from Virginia, graduated from the University of Richmond, and has a master's from the Naval Postgraduate School. Chris is also an expert on leadership because he is a leader. He is president of the McChrystal Group, a DC-based consultancy that helps leaders in organizations across the world become their very best. He's an accomplished author. His first book, Team of Teams, landed on the New York Times bestseller list. His second book, One Mission, How Leaders Build a Team of Teams, is a Wall Street Journal bestseller. As you all know, in West Virginia, all of us are either veterans or related to one. So perhaps I'm saving the best for last. In times of uncertainty, there's a special breed within the military who answer the nation's toughest calls. These men, and someday women, are Navy SEALs. And Chris is a Navy SEAL. He spent 15 years, most of that during a time of war, in the military leading SEAL teams. He was truly at the tip of the spear, serving in Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, throughout the Middle East and Africa. Chris has served in the toughest of environments known to man, where there are no easy days. He truly embodies a little-known creed in the SEAL community. The deed is all, not the glory. That is why I am so proud that West Virginia can now claim Chris as our own, and why I am honored to introduce my friend and a true Mountain State hero, Chris Fussell.
All right, thanks for that kind of introduction, and thanks to everyone here for letting me be part of the conference and for the work you're doing throughout the state. As Mara said, we are proud new residents, love our home here in Fayetteville, love the West Virginia community. We are, like everyone else, especially pertinent to the discussion today, trying to figure out the ins and outs of education from home. I've got an office mate right next to me. This is my daughter, Lanier, also one of the newest members of the state, and wrestling with Wi-Fi issues from home and all the other things that everybody's trying to figure out. But it's great to spend some time with all of you today. And to Mara's point, I'm going to lay out some ideas from our experiences in the military, specifically in the special operations community, where I see opportunity in West Virginia. So this idea of how traditional systems can make themselves more networked as a model for coordination. That was one of the critical components of our ability in special operations to figure out how to be successful in environments like Iraq, Afghanistan, and others. And hopefully there are there's some takeaways there for you all. As the leaders of higher education, I would imagine one of the critical components and one of the unique advantages you have is, and today's a great example of that, the ability to connect across universities and then more broadly across the broader audience here, not just our last panel, of industry leaders throughout the state, and create these networks that can focus on a single common mission, which is the betterment of the state and the population of the folks here in West Virginia. So I'll spend a little bit of time there, and then would also just like to throw out sort of a broader idea around the parallels that I see between the world that I grew up in the special operations community, the environments we understand, and frankly what I know and love about the state of West Virginia and some of the similarities there in those lessons. And then we can have a discussion. I've asked if Mara wouldn't mind sort of facilitating a little bit of back and forth, and then any other questions from the group as we're going through this. I would love to take questions in real time, or towards the end we can just go back and forth. So hopefully if I do my job, it'll get some ideas flowing. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen here, and it should come through on your end. I think whiteboard is the best way to think out loud. So I'm going to throw some ideas up here that hopefully set the groundwork. So I'll take a few minutes and walk through our experiences, and we can pause there and have a little bit of a discussion. So if this gets any of your wheels turning as to what you're seeing in the state or a different way of running a network type system, we can pause and have a little bit of discussion there, and I can move on to another section of the discussion here. But for starters, for those of you, I'm sure there are many veterans on the call, given that it's West Virginia and the call to service that is sort of true to the colors of the state. But for those that maybe are less familiar with the military, the military is structured like any other big institution, right? Like a university, like a big corporate entity, etc. And even the special operations is structured like this, right? It has this very nicely ordered top-down model where you have, rules and regulations and literally lines on an org chart that tell you who works for who, what responsibilities sit where, etc. And that's a really well-designed system going back generations. Systems like this have existed for thousands of years. Humanity has naturally organized itself into sort of hierarchical structures, but the last 150 years, say, as we've transitioned into the industrial age, has really refined this model to an art. And there are some real strengths that come with that, our ability to build large organizations, institutions of significant scale, and have them be relatively ordered, right? We humans are naturally chaotic. The more of us you put together, the harder it gets to manage us. So you put rules and structure in place to make that manageable, right? So the whole art of scientific management is sort of grounded to this, and that's, you can tell a lot of the history of the 20th century through this sort of model, including in the military. These institutions are really good at, this organizational design is really good at competing against like structured adversaries, whether that's on the battlefield or in the corporate space or the way that governments interact with one another. In the military, you would call this symmetric warfare, because there's a symmetry between these two, right? Their shapes sort of equal one another. We found ourselves at the turn of this century in post 9/11 fighting what you would refer to as an asymmetric fight. And so this system over here was no longer modeled the system on this side, which I'll get into here in a moment. When you look at organizations that are structured like this in a little bit more depth, what you tend to see, and now as nearly a decade as a corporate consultant, done a lot of work in this space, you tend to see a nicely structured middle part of the organization, high performance teams at the ground that also have a mini structure. There's a lieutenant in charge of that SEAL platoon, but in reality, or where that sales team, that trading desk in the financial space, etc. But when you see them in action, or you study them when they're in their teaming mode, they actually look like this. They turn into a network of interconnected people, and it's relationship and trust based, not rank and structure. That's because they're fighting very dynamic problems, whether that's on the battlefield, on the basketball court, wherever you may find yourself. And then at the top, you also tend to find something similar. These senior leaders that also interact based on relationship and trust, because they've been in the industry or in the military or wherever it may be, or in academia for many years, and they know each other professionally, they work together, etc. So this is a nice way to build an organization at scale. There are a lot of strengths with this, but there's some inherent flaws. And two of which highlighted themselves for us very quickly in our fight against Al-Qaeda were, one, the separations that exist in the layers of the organization, right? And you see this, every industry has different language they give to this, but the outcomes and the stress that is created is pretty similar, agnostic to what space you're talking about. And that is, folks down here say, well, I don't like these people because that's the bureaucracy. They slow everything down and they get in the way and they've got to meet about everything, etc. And I don't know if these people are in touch anymore, right? They've been out of the field for too long and they're now at headquarters, etc. That's a common refrain in the military, but in business as well, etc. But there's a corollary to each of those, right? Senior leaders will say, they're not giving me the information I need fast enough. They're not paying enough attention and they take too much risk in the field. These people in the middle say, I'm angry at everybody because they all treat me like the rigid middle. So there's a lot of tension that exists inside of an organizational model like this. And when you're fighting something, again, that looks the same, that's very manageable, right? That's not the end of the world, because every system is dealing with the same stuff, so to speak. But we found ourselves in a situation where the adversary had changed, right? So we had this nicely structured organization with high performance teams on the ground. And we started to identify quickly that there's a problem here by layer. And that is that tension that I described. And there's also another problem that started to become obvious to us when we started to recognize the actual design of the adversary we were facing. And it wasn't some top-down structure, it was this interconnected network model, right? And that immediately highlighted to us, we've got two issues. Not only do we have this separation by layer, but we've got this massive separation between the verticals, right? We have these really talented high performance teams on the ground, whether it's a SEAL platoon here or an Army specialized unit here or an intelligence unit here, and they are all hardwired to do one thing very well. They go out into this environment, they interact with a problem, and for us that was literally operators going to a target and interacting with the adversary and learning new intelligence, right? They get this new raw information, which at that moment is arguably the most important insight we have in the world, right? Because it's real time, it's right in front of us. And then we only had one lever, right? You would take this intelligence and you would literally walk back to your helicopters, get on board, fly back to your base, bring that information back into the system, and then it would go up through this more rigid structure. You would hand it to this intelligence officer who would hand it to her boss, who would give it to this team over here, et cetera. And eventually it would work its way up somewhere to the leadership level where they could then sort of categorize that information and say, oh, these are great insights. Let's think about what to do next. Now we've made a decision, let's push that back down into the system. And then this team here will get directive and orders and resources to go interact with this problem. Because now we see the relationship between these two things, right? And all of that takes time, right? It takes time to get back on your helicopters. It takes time to go up through this chain of command. All of these meetings and phone calls and waiting for someone to get out of the last thing and emails, et cetera. The time to get back out to this target. That was a delay that was, in our world, about 2 to 3 days. So about every 48 to 72 hours, we could turn these insights into this next action. And we started to recognize that there are these significant separations in our organization. We don't trust each other up and down these lines, right? It's because of these natural sort of vertical separations inside the organization. And we don't share information across these silos. And so we're much more comfortable just pushing insights up through and across, because that's what the rule book tells us to do. And we were not paying attention to the difference in time that was costing us, right? And so after a while, we recognized, hey, as soon as you touch this problem here, it immediately, within literally a matter of minutes, starts to affect this problem over here. Why? Because there are all these other hidden subnetworks that we can't see. There's a neighbor that knows this person who says, hey, I think you might want to get out of town, right? Your cousin just got arrested. There's additional parts of the network that you can't see. All those aspects would come to life and make this action less relevant than it would have been. And so what that drove was a change in our leadership that said, okay, here's what I think we need to do. I need this team to be able to go out into the fight, interact with this problem, learn this new information like we talked about, and then on their own, they need to decide to go to this objective here. They need to address that within a matter of minutes before this part of the network woke up and started to change things. Then if they do that well, they can learn new information and go from there to this objective over here. And so if we can get that level of independence and intelligence and insight into what we're thinking strategically, then perhaps they can move through that very complex problem without having to come back and depend upon all these very structured ways of passing information and making decisions that cost us this new critical variable, which is time. So that was the challenge, right? And it's easy to throw on a whiteboard to say, well, that's what we had to wrestle with. The execution and change was pretty complex, right? Because at the core of it, what our leaders recognized they had to do, and this is where I think at least in my mind, this segue over to the state of West Virginia and the networks that you all are part of. First, they had to change the strategic conversation of the organization, right? So when we came into the fight, we had a very clear strategy around winning, defeating the enemy, et cetera, et cetera. And that all sounds good, and that's nice to put on the wall. But in reality, we were interpreting what win meant inside of our specific verticals, right? Because I would say, well, win for my SEAL platoon means when I go out and find new information, I'm going to keep it to myself and hoard it because I want to get that next mission for me and my team. I don't care about the time. I care about us being able to do operation after operation, right? So those vertical and horizontal separations came in to haunt us when we recognized that our approach, our strategic approach, our conversation there was too simple for the realities of the problem. So this, on the strategy front, it changed from this idea of winning to a discussion about who we were as a culture. What was the cultural conversation that was going to unify us across those separations that exist inside the organization so that we too could act like more of a connected network? That led to a change in how we communicated. Our communication changed from traditionally disciplined, this person makes a decision, tells this person what to do, etc., to a much more networked type model. So what we eventually realized we had to become was a combination of these two forces. We had to be both structured where that was necessary, and then decentralized and networked where that was viable, right? Because we needed teams on the ground to be able to connect across these different boundaries. We did that by accelerating our communication in a very, very aggressive fashion, much more aggressive than we found most outside of the military require. But the principle holds true. We were used to synchronizing ourselves at the strategic level sort of on a weekly and monthly cadence, and that would really be just the top 50 leaders in the organization. In time, our senior leadership, who were managing a global force of 25 or 30,000 people, accelerated our communication synchronization to a 24-hour cycle. So every 24 hours would start with a global video teleconference, much like we're doing right now, but we would have 7,000 or 8,000 people on the net for 60 to 90 minutes. Just having a bottom-up discussion. So these teams down here on the ground who would just run those operations could come in and say, okay, here's what we learned, here's what we think is changing, etc. And all of us could then learn from their experiences, and we would create a sense of an awareness around the organization of what the outside environment actually looked like. And then teams could be much more informed when they went back out in the field themselves. That ultimately drove the third component of change, which was how we made decisions, so decision making. What had traditionally been a very top-down structure, I'll give you new information and you tell me what to do next. You make the big decision, and then I'll make the tactical decisions in the field once we're on the target, so to speak. Our leaders wanted us to have enough information so that we could not just make the tactical decisions, but then index that intelligence against the bigger picture and decide where to go next. Like that came with a lot of trust and relationship, team-oriented behavior that tends to sit down here, but we had to scale that broadly throughout these red line networks that were so important to how we were able to keep pace with this new network adversary. All of that was bound inside of sort of a behavior shift in the organization, right? Which is that last point I was making around trust and relationship. That became the foundation for how we were able to make this work. So I'm going to leave that up as a placeholder. And then I want to offer one more sort of observation about West Virginia in particular. Bear with me if I can shift screens just a second here, because not surprisingly, my wife and I lived in Washington, D.C. for about 10 years after we got out of the service, and then moving here to West Virginia. Mara, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that image? Great. You get a lot of questions about, why would you do that? That seems different, not a standard decision. And for me, it's been, and my wife and our kids, quite a simple decision. And one of the things I learned in Afghanistan that I came to love was what I'll describe here in a moment, but really coming to understand the people in that country, right? When we started fighting in Afghanistan, what we saw was this incredibly rugged terrain. This is a shot of some of the mountains in the northern part of the country that are obviously intimidating and tough to figure out how to work inside of from a military lens. And on top of that, we saw these problems that we knew we needed to address. Right? We had this very specific image of the Taliban fighter. We had an image of their senior leader, right? We imagined bin Laden was sitting on top of this whole thing called Al-Qaeda, and Taliban was sort of a component of it, all of which proved to be untrue. We saw social problems that had been created by the Taliban, at least in the history we were telling ourselves at that point, that we would go in and address and solve and sort of be seen as the heroes to the Afghan people. At least that was proved to be inaccurate, the theory of the case. And we saw this wrecked society that had been dealing with strife for several generations at that point, all the way from the Soviet invasion up through post 9/11. And remember, Afghanistan was this amazing sort of tourist country going back to the 1960s, and all of that had been wrecked through a series of mismanaged problems that's inside of the country. And so that was the image we had. And we were going to solve this problem by attacking these issues head on. And the issues that I just outlined were much more complex than we understood out of the gate. So that seemed from an outside vantage point. What we didn't understand was, at least at the start, was this, right? The Afghan people that had a long legacy, a people of pride, a hardworking people who were very welcoming historically to outsiders, gracious hosts to those that wanted to visit their country, steeped in their appreciation of tribal relationships and their code of ethics. What we didn't understand was this, people that had carved a living out of that very, very harsh terrain that we saw when we arrived. And that's a gritty and tough type of people that believe in one another. We didn't understand their core value of family and how important that was to them and their society. And that they saw those problems the same way we did. Those were problems they wanted to solve, but it took us years, frankly, and many still learn this lesson when they spend time in a place like Afghanistan, that you're only going to solve those issues by connecting here first. You have to understand and relate to the people on the ground and work from there up to the problems, not the other way around. If you try to start with the big issues, you only seemed like another occupying force that was coming in and trying to say, we've got the great idea. And their response was, you don't understand our families, you don't understand our children, you don't understand our history. So we learned to start there in our conversation. And so when I look at West Virginia, our new home, as Mara said, where we've been coming for over 20 years, and have a love for the land and people here, it reminds me of a similar sort of problem and reality. Right? When people from the outside, and I can say this as someone who was once a visitor and now a proud resident of the state, when they look at West Virginia from the outside, they see the big problems, right? The statistics that so many of you are involved in trying to solve for. They see outsized images of the poverty of the state. They see or hear stories about the environmental impact of an extraction economy that has, as you all know, such an important and core part of the history of the state. So all of these issues that ride over top of the state, it just reminds me so much of spending time in that sort of rugged terrain with a people who were often forgotten in the mix. And so what people from the outside, I think, don't understand about West Virginia is very similar. The pride and the strength and the grittiness of the people that built this state. You know, the willingness to carve out a living in terrain that, frankly, most people bypassed. You know, a lot of people just walked through West Virginia and said, that's too hard for me. I'm going to go further west until I find something that's flat and more easily farmed, and naturally that's selected for different types of personalities. And so the types of folks that settled and built and carved a living out of West Virginia are unlike any you'll find anywhere else in the country, I would argue. And so it's in a similar fashion, like the solutions here have to be tied to the history of the state, because that gritty, tough mountaineer personality is ultimately the foundation on which all of these problems can be solved. And so just a final note, this is a friend of mine, General Kash Sadat, who is now a general officer in the Afghan army. And at the peak of the problems with the US sort of sizing down, Kash had spent years fighting with us alongside. He was raised under the Taliban in Kabul. He was taught English by a missionary couple who put their lives at risk to teach young Afghan children English. And when the British arrived into Kabul, they found Kash and his brother, who were then 14 and 15 years old. Kash spoke Queen's English, and they said, okay, we want to hire you as an interpreter. They figured out that he was a very bright young man. They sent him to the UK. He went through UK military academy, came back and was one of the earliest members in the special operations community inside of Afghanistan. He and his family, their lives were under great danger as a result of that. And he came to the United States for about two or 3 years. And those of us that were friends with the Afghan military were able to get him out and his family. And Kosh actually worked with us and for us at my consulting firm for about 2 years. And he was great at that as well, not surprisingly. And 2 years ago, he made the decision to go back to Afghanistan. Kosh is now in charge of the special operations units there, oversees part of the military, and is on every hit list for every bad person in Afghanistan. And he made that choice because when I talked to him about it, gave up this cush life that he had in the United States because he said, look, that's where I can have impact, right? That's where I can make a difference. So it's a good reminder to me when people ask me why we decided to move to West Virginia, because you go to where you can have an impact. So with that, I will end the sort of those opening thoughts. And Mara, would love to turn it over to you to maybe have a bit of a conversation and then open it up to others in the group.
Chris, thank you for such a wonderful presentation. There's so many leadership lessons there for us to learn. And I'll tell you, as West Virginians, the picture of the miner that you showed, that's in all of our souls. Nearly all of us have someone in our family, their past or present, who has mined coal or worked in the extraction industries. And one of the things we're looking at in West Virginia right now is diversification of our economy. But as you pointed out in your presentation, many times we just need to look at our strengths and our weaknesses and what we are already doing or have done. So I know the concept of the outdoor economy is something that everybody's talking about right now. And I think you have some definite ideas on that. Could you share your ideas and kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I started coming to West Virginia for rock climbing in the New River Gorge area in the late 90s. And so that's really where my first love for the state was, just in the outdoor economy. And it was nascent at that stage. I mean, whitewater rafting obviously was the thing that got it on the map. And I'm talking about a very specific side of the outdoor economy, which obviously bridges from, fishing, hunting, four-wheeling, rock climbing, skiing, etc. Anything outside of these walls is in the outdoor economy. My niche was in the sort of those specific sports, mainly climbing, but really fell in love with that sport here. But as I've gotten older and seen a broader perspective on what that outdoor economy looks like, I think one common thread around West Virginia in the outdoor economy space, and the reason that I think it does tie to the image of that coal miner, is if you speaking specifically about climbing, right? But if you're a climber that comes to West Virginia, it's hard. Like, it's a harder and grittier type of climbing than other places in the country. And there's a whole reason why that is. It's colder. It's always shadowy because you're climbing out of the gorge. It's harder to get to the trails, because it's West Virginia terrain. But if you're hunting in West Virginia, you're, cleaning a deer and carrying it up and down through the Appalachian Mountains, right? If you're an ATV enthusiast, you're on the Hatfield-McCoy trails, you don't want to get lost or stuck, 20 miles from nowhere in the middle of Appalachia. And so I think all of that is an extension of the grit and personality of the state that made it so great in its origins and continues to be the foundation. I see a direct tie between that gritty mountaineer personality and the people that love the outdoor sports that West Virginia has to offer. And I think for folks in the outdoor world, which I've been relatively tied to for my love for rock climbing and the tie of the special operations community to that world broadly, because we leverage a lot of expertise from those arenas in the special operations community, there is an appreciation of that grittiness for this state. When people hear, oh, you kayak the Golly every season, that has a certain level of that means something in the river community around the world. Like, that means you're a serious athlete, right? If you're in the hunting world, if you hunt in West Virginia, that means something to hunters. If you rock climb, there's a shift, I think, in the outdoor economy where people want that grittier feel. They want to be connected with something that is bigger than themselves. And I would argue so many of the spaces in the outdoor economy have become relatively turnkey, and it's so designed for, the masses. And West Virginia still holds that position as, just last weekend there was the rim to rim 100-mile race here in Fayetteville, and it was branded as there's nothing easy about this, right? Which just has an allure to people in that space. It's West Virginia, expect it to be tough. And if you want that challenge, this is the place for you. So I think for me, I see a direct tie between those original core personalities that carved this state out and what the future of that economy can look like.
Thank you, Chris. And I've received this question, or a form of it, from several of our attendees by chat. When you look at government, universities, politics, even corporations, there are a lot of silos. And you have some who have a knowledge is power mentality, and they hold information, some intentionally and some unintentionally. What can leaders do to break down these silos when it comes to internal communications?
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate challenge, right? It's the right place to start thinking. The short answer is it's hard, and it's always going to be hard, right? The longer answer is that it's up to leaders, and this is based on my experience in the military, what I've seen in the corporate space. Over the last year, we've done a lot of work inside of states and large cities, given the sort of crisis response to the COVID pandemic. And so leaders can be the CEO, the president of a university, or a coalition of leaders inside a community, or a broad network of like-minded leaders like we probably have here today. The core is identifying an issue that everyone connects to. And in West Virginia, it could be it's the future of the state, the future of the economy, the people of the state. Choosing those sort of very high level North Star messages, as we would call them in the consulting world. And then underneath that, building the logical explanation of why those verticals need to be broken down. The one thing that doesn't work is just telling people, no more silos. You gotta connect across, and we're getting stovepiped, and we've all heard those buzzwords so many times. It just doesn't work, and it frustrates leaders when they say it and it doesn't happen. But it also frustrates people in the organization when they hear it and they're not given the opportunity through a change in sort of communication processes, and they're not given the message to say, well, connect about what? I'm not clear yet what I should keep in my lane, and when you want me to reach across and connect with Mara and her team over here, right? You're asking me to take all the risk of making those decisions, and I'm pretty busy, right? I'm trying to just do my job here and make sure that my vertical is okay. So it really does come down to leaders establishing what are those things we need to align underneath, and what are the structures we're going to put in place for leaders to reach across boundaries and communicate with one another as we go down into those verticals. I mean, a great example of this is, was mentioned earlier in today's session, Brad Smith, when he was CEO of Intuit. We did some work with he and his teams where I first got to know Brad, and that essentially, even in the corporate space, his reason for wanting to bring us in for a conversation was, I have this amazing organization that's purpose-built into multiple verticals, all of which see themselves as an independent business. And by the way, I was part of building that model, right? Because it always worked really well. But the market is changing, and how people are going to leverage this sort of software that we provide is changing. And so I need to unite them. I can't be QuickBooks and TurboTax and all these sub verticals. I need one Intuit to become a thing. I need people to come and see, here's what this organization can do for me and my financial needs. So he created this very powerful North Star message. And was able to go down to his subordinate vertical leaders and say, look, if you don't connect around this idea, eventually our consumer base is going to walk away. They have to see us as a one-stop shop for integrated financial solutions. And I will create the forum. So he similar to what McChrystal did in the special operations community, created a weekly and then eventually bi-weekly multi-hour forum where hundreds of his leaders would come in from around the country and they would have this conversation. Are we connecting across these verticals to solve for that North Star, which eventually keeps us tied to our end users who make this whole place possible, all right? And so establishing what that looks like, you know, in this example for the people of West Virginia, the future of the state, et cetera, and then figuring out what are the forums, things like this, where we can have these conversations and force people to integrate and have the opportunity to do so is the start point. It took us 2 years to get there, and that's with 2 years of getting shot at every night, right? So, which is a pretty good forcing function to change. So it's hard and challenging, but it's the number one thing that you need is the energy and discipline focus of leaders who are focused on what the eventual end state is going to look like.
Thank you, Chris. And you mentioned Intuit. We're so thankful for what Brad Smith is doing at both WVU and Marshall and in Bluefield with the call center down there. And another success story that we have right now, of course, that was mentioned in the president's panel, and I'm sure across this whole conference, is Hyperloop. And there's two things that Hyperloop identified is the main reasons why they chose West Virginia. One was that we all get along. Sometimes we fight, but it doesn't really matter political party. We'll all work together for the betterment of the state. And two, the accessibility of leaders at all levels, from both senators to the governor to his whole cabinet and in the local level. So I know all of us are very proud of landing the Hyperloop certification, and it's truly a collective effort. So with that, and with what Brad Smith and John Chambers are doing in the state, what do you see as two real areas of strength or growth for the state in addition to the outdoor economy?
Yeah, I think the example of that you give about unifying the people is frankly, it's one of them. I mean, the unity that exists inside this state. And again, back to the Afghanistan analogy, I tell my friends in the service all the time, look, if there's when you think of all the positive things of a place like Afghanistan, if you want to find it in the United States, come to West Virginia, right? Because yeah, there are counties that have rivalries that go back generations. There are, you know, inside those counties, different parts of the community that are physically separated all the way back, sort of the holler evolution of the state. But if you come in as an outside actor and think that you can poke one of them, they're all gonna come after you, right? And that's a real strength that can't be underestimated, because that doesn't, having lived in many parts of the country, all over the world, that doesn't exist in most places, right? There's a genuine pride and strength in this community that leaders can unite and pull together. I think they just need that message. So I think that's one aspect, and the other I would also tie to the people of West Virginia as the future opportunity, because ultimately, look, I think all opportunity comes down to who are you putting on the team, right? And there's this latent capability inside of West Virginia, at least from outsiders, I think, that has to be re-messaged to say, look, if what the world needs right now, especially and so acutely over the last year, we've seen this, is gritty, focused, hardworking people that don't ask for a lot when it comes to solving problems, right? The thing that's always amazed me about this state is when it goes through hard times, it rallies as a community, and it doesn't look for handouts. It just solves its own problems internally because it knows it can depend on its neighbor, right? And I can speak, having been in the consulting space now for many years, there are so many corporate leaders that are hungry for that, Where do I find that sort of workforce? Where do I find people that want to be part of a team and make it better every day? And when you look at the stats that don't get advertised enough around the continuity of workforce and all the other positive stats that exist inside West Virginia, there's a massive strength there. I think it just needs to be effectively marketed to those that are now especially realizing the fragility of completely outsourced supply chain and having engineers all over the world and some sort of broadly networked coalition that under the pressures of last year quickly start to fall in upon themselves. How can I insource that? Where are the people in the United States that can be that solution for me? And I think West Virginia has to be on their list.
Well, Chris, this is Sarah, and we just thank you very much. I mean, like I said, like Mara said, leadership, strategies, a little insight. We could unpack this topic for days and weeks to come, and we appreciate very much your insight and for connecting with us today. And we look forward to working with you as we move forward to build a stronger West Virginia. And leaders like you, we definitely need them in West Virginia. And so thank you, Chris. Thank you, Maura. We appreciate the dialogue.